Well, hello again, everyone. Wherever and whenever you're watching this, I trust you're keeping well and that the Lord is keeping you strong in His love. It's great to share God's word with you once again. And today we're looking at the final verse, verse 33 of chapter 16 of John's Gospel. Over these last few weeks, we've been looking at Jesus' farewell discourse, as people talk to it, the sermon he preached to his disciples on the evening before he was tried and he was crucified. So we've called this series Jesus' famous last words. And today we look at the very final verse of the discourse, this farewell discourse. For the next couple of weeks, we'll be looking at the amazing prayer that Jesus goes on to pray for his followers. But for now, let's take a close look at the way Jesus brings this crucial teaching to a close. And so these are his last words before he goes into a prayer for his disciples at the end of this amazing sermon, this amazing farewell discourse. He says this: I have told you these things. I've brought you all this teaching. I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you'll have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Let me just read those words to you again. Jesus says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. This is God's holy and powerful word. So this is the conclusion that Jesus has been leading up to. These are simple words, yet they go to the heart of life, the universe, and everything. 4 deep truths. Let's look at them in turn. And firstly, I want to reflect on this phrase: in this world, you will have trouble. Now, if Jesus hadn't said anything else true, and actually everything he said was true, but if he said nothing else that was true, surely no one could contest the truth of this statement. And it carries with it a tremendous amount of baggage. In the immediate context, Jesus is speaking of the trouble these early disciples of his would face from those who would not or did not believe in him. They would face hatred and persecution. Now just pause there a moment. I don't know that I have ever experienced somebody's hatred. I've experienced people being frustrated with me or disapproving of me in some way or being intolerant towards me, and those things can be difficult to cope with. But these disciples were going to face hatred and bitter persecution. Paul, the Apostle Paul, reflecting on his own experience of trouble as a servant of Jesus, says this in one of his letters: I have worked hard, been in prison, been flogged, and repeatedly exposed to death. 5 times I received 39 lashes with the whip. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was pelted with stones. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a day and night on the open sea. I have been constantly on the move. I've been in danger from bandits, from my fellow countrymen, from Gentiles, in the city, in the country, at sea, and in danger from false believers. I have laboured and toiled and have often gone without sleep. I have known hunger and thirst and often gone without food. I have been cold and naked. Besides everything else, I face daily the pressure of my concern for all the churches. Who is weak, and I do not feel weak? Who is led into sin, and I do not inwardly burn? Well, perhaps the troubles you have experienced, or maybe the troubles you're experiencing right now, are not quite so extreme. But nevertheless, we all have our fair share, and some seem to have more than their fair share. What troubles do you have to deal with? What events, injustices, and griefs have been forced upon you? What internal frailties do you wrestle with? Millions of people struggle to make sense of the difficulties they have experienced. Some find the pain of life overwhelming. Others begin to despair of making sense of life and retreat into various ways of palliating themselves through shopping, sex, food, entertainment, or some other means of distraction from the pain and the emptiness. For Christians, there is some encouragement in knowing that Jesus experienced his own share of trouble. Of course, as he said these words we're looking at today, he knew what was about to take place, what was about to happen to him. In a few short hours, he would descend to a very dark place emotionally, and then be put through the horrors of a show trial, torture, and brutal execution. Life is pain. There is no two ways about it. You can deny it, fight it, repress it, or try to ignore it, but sooner or later, pain will make its presence felt in your life. And let me tell you a mystery. Most truly interesting people have experienced and found a way to overcome trouble and suffering. And the best example is Jesus himself. He not only faced trouble, but he emerged victorious. In fact, he faced as much trouble as anyone who's ever lived and emerged victorious. And that makes him very interesting indeed. The next phrase I want to look at from this verse are these words then, I have overcome the world. In these words, Jesus lifts the lid on his victory. He has not only triumphed internally, he has not only developed the resilience to face the difficulties of life and stay strong, his victory is not primarily internal at all. Jesus has triumphed over the physical and spiritual structures of this whole world such that they have been entirely disarmed. He has overcome this world and all the trouble that it inflicts upon us. He has defeated our sin and selfishness. So often, we are the architects of our own downfall. Through our radical self-absorption, our unbridled appetites, our vanity and pride, our greed and corruption, we shame ourselves in our own eyes and in the eyes of others. In our rebellion, we anger God and bring grief to ourselves and those around us. Jesus has decisively overcome our sin, overcome our selfishness and our self-absorption in his death for us on the cross. He has defeated all that is untrue. I don't know about you, but I am completely sick of people playing fast and loose with the truth. And I don't think I'm alone. It seems that people today feel very little concern to make sure that what they are saying actually corresponds with reality. But before I become too judgmental, I know about my own struggles in this area. Sometimes I'm tempted to manipulate the truth to fit my own aims and objectives. At times, I catch myself exaggerating or even making things up to attract attention or admiration. Jesus is the truth. He has never told a lie, and he never will. His words are golden, trustworthy truth. He has decisively overcome a world of spin and sleight of hand. Thirdly, he has defeated unkindness and cruelty and abuse and hatred and violence. We all experience unkindness and meanness at the hands of others, and for sensitive people, that alone can be a very difficult experience. But what of the more destructive forms of unlove, hatred, abuse, cruelty, torture, and violence? These things can cause us trauma that we struggle to ever get over. And in extreme cases, of course, they can cost us our lives. Well, Jesus plumbed the depths and triumphed over them all. All the spiritual and political and religious and personal hatred that this world can muster was lavished upon him, and it simply couldn't pollute him. He remained kind, loving, gentle, humble, and truthful. He is all grace, all the time, no matter what. His goodness and love stand eternal when all the forces of hatred have long ago fallen to dust. He has decisively defeated unkindness, cruelty, abuse, hatred, and violence. And lastly, and most significantly, he has defeated sickness and death. On the cross, he, the life of the world, tasted death. A cruel, barbaric death designed to utterly expose and humiliate and crush the victim. A death from which there was no coming back. On the cross, he bore all our sickness and our physical frailty. Jesus plumbed the depths. There is no illness, no weakness, no physical challenge, no death that Jesus cannot understand or sympathize with. But it's also true that Jesus has decisively defeated sickness and frailty and death. Jesus died the most awful death, but death could not hold him. He burst out of the grave like a firework. No tomb can contain him. And if you remain in him, there's no tomb that can contain you. The sky, not the grave, is our goal. Jesus has a place in the new creation for you. Sickness and death cannot steal it from you. On the contrary, they are the gateway to getting there. At the moment of your greatest weakness and isolation, at the moment of death, you stand because of Jesus and his victory on the threshold of a scintillating and eternal new existence. And so there's nothing that this world can do to you that Jesus cannot repair and make good. There is nothing that this world can take from you that Jesus cannot restore. There is nothing that this world can deprive you of that Jesus cannot give to you. He has overcome the world. And in response to his victory over this world, the world in which we have so much trouble, and that he had so much trouble, there's a couple of things we must do. Firstly, we must absorb the truth that he has taught us. We must eat Jesus' words, digest them. May they filter into the very deepest recesses of who we are and form our identity. Because when we live and breathe his words and his message and his life, we know stillness and confidence inside. Jesus said here, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In the Bible, the devil is sometimes referred to as Beelzebul, which I believe literally means Lord of the Flies. Some think it captures the restlessness and drivenness of the devil. The devil is frantic and frightened and furious. He is angry and agitated and anxious. He is all rage and fury. And living in this world, he can so easily lead us down the same path. But Jesus will not tolerate these conditions. He commands peace and stillness, and in him we slow down and enjoy the scenery. We are not so easily disturbed. Our fears are soothed and our anger dissolves. He leads us beside still waters. Jesus has overcome the world so don't let it drive you mad. Listen to his voice, eat his words, drink in the peace. And secondly, we can take heart. In fact, Jesus commands us to. We can be encouraged and we can live courageously because we've got nothing to lose. Or better, we have everything and there's no way we can lose it. Things can only get better. And whatever this world throws at us, in Jesus, our final victory is secure. Of course, while we live in this world, we'll often have moments of anxiety and sometimes days of anxiety and maybe even weeks or even months of anxiety and stress and strain. But in the midst of these very human and very painful experiences, Jesus looks right at us with a broad smile and urges us towards courage. Because once Jesus is present and when we are in him, there really isn't any reason to be afraid anymore. In the midst of trouble, may the words of Jesus, may the mighty deeds of Jesus, may the atoning death of Jesus, and may the glorious resurrection of Jesus light up your world. May his victory be your victory. And may his victory bring peace to your inner world and enable you to live courageously. God bless you today. Go in peace to love and serve him.